If you want to hurt somebody, there's a few ways of doing it. You can really hurt someone without ever laying a hand on them. You could, of course, torture them, you know, put bamboo shoots under their fingernails and do all these horrific things. But if you really want to hurt somebody, hurt their child.
A restraining order.
A what?
A restraining order.
A restraining order? Means that Peter can't come to the house anymore.
Why?
Because the court said so, at least for a time being.
Why?
We discussed this, Jake. Remember all of the things that your daddy did? Remember how he left you in the car, and when you came home that one night, how upset you were?
Yeah.
Well, that's wrong. That's wrong, and you could have been hurt. And until we go to the court and get all these things figured out, I really don't want to put you in any kind of danger. Okay? It would kill me if I let Peter harm you in any way. Do you understand?
We are now seeing quite blatantly the movement to remove children from their parents. It's been done through what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, step by step by step by step, where more and more parental rights are taken by the state, more and more and more, and where the school becomes ever more powerful in the control it has over the children. And now we're moving into areas that we have, staggeringly extreme as they may seem, they're no longer rare. This is commonplace.
The devil has worked through governments. Often the devil works through governments. If you read the prophecies in Isaiah 14, in Ezekiel 28, when it talks about Lucifer, it is talking about the devil operating through Tyre and Babylon. He works through, Daniel chapter 10 talks about him working through the king of Persia. The devil operates through these government leaders to try to persecute God's people.
Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. And take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints.
It is a big, ugly, awful, incredible story that people don't know what to do with that.
What is
Bottom line.
the importance of this book, do you think?
Well, I think with respect to that book, Alec has articulated something that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in this country have experienced, and that's the pain of separation from their child. That's the inability to parent the way they want to parent.
And you call that parental alienation syndrome.
In an extreme form, it's parental alienation. Now, I'm not going to debate whether it's a syndrome or whether it's not a syndrome, but certainly parental alienation exists, and anybody who works in this area and parents all around the country have actually experienced that.
And Mark, you helped Alec write the book, yes?
Yes.
He also wrote a book with your brother, Stephen,
He did.
right?
I met Mark through my brother, Stephen. He'd written Stephen's book, Unusual Suspects, with him, and I met Mark. We all went down to the Super Bowl a couple years ago in Miami, and Mark was just a great guy, and I loved working with him. He was a dog.
Mike, isn't it sort of natural sometimes when people get divorced for one parent to be somewhat alienated from the kid?
You know, there's some estimates that say that in up to 80% of the cases there's some level of alienation, but what we see is that there's a wide range, so it can be from very mild to very, very severe.
And in Alec's case, it was severe, in your opinion.
In my opinion, it was severe. I mean, he was frustrated at every turn with respect to just being enjoying a natural relationship with his daughter and being her father.
What made it so severe, do you think? And whose fault was that?
Well, I think there's a combination of factors there. I think that the court system today enables a parent who's inclined to be an alienator. The court will allow that to happen. I think that's unfortunate. That all the vehicles to fight are already built into the system if there's a predisposition to that. So I think there's...
That's an important distinction, and that is, forget about the litigants, because, which is hard to do, but just for the purposes of this discussion, you know, litigants come and people come to the dissolution of a marriage with a lot of bitter feelings. Marriage is still a very important commitment to people. They have a lot of hope. They certainly didn't plan on things going that way. There's a lot of blame and acrimony. These are two people that should not be principal witnesses against each other in a trial. They are biased, prejudiced people, and the courts know that, and the courts treat in family law and in divorce custody law, this is a civil proceeding that metes out criminal punishment. You were denied your rights as a parent based on the testimony of very, very biased people, not just the other, your ex-spouse, but some of her collateral witnesses as well. Custody evaluations are very, very biased. But the thing is, the courts know this. The courts, and they do nothing to stop it because it's a racket whereby people are lining their pockets with a lot of money.
Well, we discussed that before about how it's just a big racket. Do you agree with that, Mark?
Oh, I do. And one of the things, too, with parental alienation is it's not always the father who is alienated from the child. I'm working on a book currently with a woman who went through this very same thing where her son, the alienation was so extreme that the father had remarried, and the stepmother told the child, because this couple was very young whenever they divorced, the new stepmother told the child, I am your real mother. This other woman, she's just this crazy lady who wants to pretend like she's your mother, so let's just go along with it from time to time, but I'm really your mother. That's the depth of the degree of alienation that she experienced. So it's not just something that is perpetuated against men, but it's also, women experience this as well. It's when you have you know, one parent or the other that has an alienating nature, all bets are off on what's going to take place.
Is it
can
mostly
go either
women?
way.
Is it mostly women who are the alienators?
I think it's, more importantly, not in some gender-specific way, women are more likely to have the power to alienate. Women are more likely to be given primary custody of a child because of the way that the processes have evolved over the years. So a woman is more likely to have primary custody and therefore alienate the father from them. But the point is that the courts and the judges, forget about the lawyers. The lawyers are going to do anything they can to keep conflict resolution out of the courtroom. The judges should know that what's going on and how this stuff can be circumvented. There are recommendations that judges and some family therapists who work outside the system. Some of the people that I spoke to for this book, and I'd love you to comment about this, some of the people I spoke to outside this book who were family therapists who did not rely on the state-sponsored family law system to make a living. They weren't a part of the conspiracy.
Yes.
They work in family law outside of that. They don't take referrals from judges and so forth. They have their own very healthy practices. These people spoke scathingly about that.
No evidence was presented to change custody. There was no reason for them to change custody. There was nothing presented that would even carry any weight to change the custody. As a parent, the only thing you want to do is protect your children. And this legal system now has put me in a place where I have no power. They put the power in the hands of the psychologist, the kid's attorney, the evaluator, and they're essentially trying to take me completely out of my children's lives.
Parental alienation is junk science. Parental alienation was a concept invented by some fellow back east, and his theory was that parents could alienate a child from the other parent.
The family courts loved the idea. They didn't realize at first that it wasn't based on any research. And they just thought, oh, this is an easy answer. It explains away these horrible cases that we don't want to have to deal with. Because if we think about whether abuse happened or not, we have to deal with evidence, we have to deal with trauma, we have to deal with horrible ideas, and we have to take a stand and say whether or not it happened.
I went into court with the idea that we were going to bring two sides before a judge, and they were going to come up with a reasonable conclusion to whatever, or the issue at hand. And I found out that it was 180 degrees from...
Because there are people I know who, they can have a collaborative divorce. They can have a divorce in which everybody has some dignity and they can resolve these issues without lawyers and judges and court-ordered therapists and everything intruding in their lives. We're going to talk about that with some people who are activists in the shared parenting movement. Let's put it this way. So much of what I went through the last 8 years, it was unnecessary.
If you have a contested custody case in California, you have to go to mediation. You have to go to county mediation and see if you can resolve the issue there. And in some counties, mediation is confidential, and they just try to help you work out your issues and come to a custody agreement. And if you don't, you go fresh to the court. And in other counties, it's called recommending mediation. And there you go meet with the mediators. You try to work out your issues, and if you don't, the mediator can make a recommendation to the judge about what he or she thinks should be the custodial status of each parent.
And the real problem is that mediator ends up deciding your case. And that's not how the system is supposed to work. And so when the mediator decides your case, whoever loses is, quote, disgruntled, and they should be not because of the outcome, but because they never got a trial.
The fate of thousands of children who are caught in divorce. Now, the tough decisions are often influenced by court-appointed advocates, but critics say some of these advocates are poorly trained and potentially biased. CBS Atlanta's investigative reporter Jeff Cherico found there is no agency watching over these advocates.
None at all, Stephanie.
Wow.
So bear with me, this gets a little complicated. The legal term for these advocates is guardian ad litem. They are attorneys sworn to look out for the best interest of children. Many of them do that, but some parents and child psychologists say some don't.
It's like being raped of your children.
Alex Higdon
The mental anguish for both my children and I has been huge.
and Gracie Ortiz-Terrett have never met, but both say they were railroaded in court by powerful attorneys charged with protecting their children.
I'm the one who has lost custody of my children.
In an interview earlier this year, Terrett says Raina Nadler and Jeannie Kuttner were far from objective in their investigation. In court documents, her attorney alleges the women improperly communicated with the judge, dictated changes in her custody, and even yelled and shouted at and tried to influence Terrett's witnesses. And there's more.
They refused to meet with me. They refused to obtain any information from me. For a period of 90 days, they continued to work with the opposing party. And guardian ad litem just simply cannot do that.
We tried to talk with the Guardians after they didn't reply to 3 requests for an interview.
And I'm Jeff Cherico with CBS Atlanta News.
Can you please? One answered the door, but not our tough questions.
The opposing party recommended a guardian ad litem.
Higdon, a former Atlanta Falcon, tells a similar story.
Don Smith?
He says guardian ad litem Don Smith, seen here in a YouTube video, recommended changing his son's school and his custody before evaluating him. And Higdon says this 2010 email shows Smith lied to get the job. It appears to show Smith claiming she has no connection to or opinion on a group that opposes the autism treatments Higdon's sons were receiving.
Well, we come to find out she was actually on the board of that institution in 2004 and 5. She had a personal agenda that she was going to fulfill, and that personal agenda not only included her agenda of how she believed about autism treatment, but it included also about retaliating against me for giving her pushback.
Many of them don't know what they're saying. And, you know, and it runs up the bill. There's no accountability. They're inherently biased.
Family therapist and expert witness Dr. Monty Weinstein says he's seen guardians often push to limit one parent's custodial time, which he says isn't healthy. He says guardians are highly paid but poorly trained in child development, biased, and potentially influenced.
Guardian ad litems would go with the law firms that give them, in many cases, the most business. So if the law firm is advocating, let's take this mother or father out of the picture, unfortunately, many times they'll find a rationale to talk to the judge.
Since there's no agency that oversees or licenses guardians, it's hard to know how big the problem is. The State Bar Association tells me it doesn't track
how many, if any, guardians it has disciplined.
Do you have any opinion as to whether or not there should be more oversight of guardians ad litem?
I think we have the appropriate oversight.
The state's child advocate, Tanya Boga, says she thinks guardians are largely honest and ethical and believes the court system weeds out the bad ones.
The judge can remove this guardian ad litem if evidence is brought before the court to share that this person is not engaging in their duties properly.
But Higdon and Terrett say the judge shrugged off their concerns, putting their kids at risk.
The children are not getting treatment for their underlying medical challenges.
And he just says he hates his life. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from both children because they don't get to see me.
Now, I've spoken to one man who says the court ordered him to pay the guardian $60,000. There is no proof that any of the guardians in this story were influenced by money. The point is, there just isn't an agency that can determine when it does happen. Dawn Smith didn't reply to any of my 4 requests for an interview.
Jeff, do these parents have any recourse at all?
Not really. Once the judge rules, it's really hard to change anything. Now, Alex Higdon is filing a federal lawsuit against both the judge and the guardian. And in Terrett's case, which is very rare, the original judge stepped down, a new judge took over, and
it's very widespread, unfortunately, among abusers to use custody and visitation litigation as a continuing weapon of the abuse.
There are dozens and dozens who will all agree with me that this junk science called parental alienation syndrome has been responsible for so much harm. And yet I am aware every day of judges basing decisions on this and psychologists using this as knowledge and making recommendations to judges because of this junk science. And it is appalling and responsible for so much.
And you may think that this will be a great win for you if they're all with you and hate her, but let me tell you something. Hear what I'm saying.
I will.
Hear what I'm saying. This will backfire on you so bad you will never believe it. You won't see it coming. You will never believe it. The parent that alienates a child from the other parent ultimately winds up being on the very short end of the stick, because these kids get smart enough to start thinking for themselves, and they're going to look around and say, why did you do this way? Right. And I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't want to have anything to do with either one of you when they get to a point of independent thought.
I would hope that would be our nightmare, but I have not.
The people that I talk to across the United States, they say that each state has its judge, individual rogue judge, or its individual rogue court, or the whole court system is a mess, does not protect children. So it's a national and an international
In
problem.
parental alienation syndrome, one parent brainwashes or programs the child to turn against and vilify the other parent. It is difficult for many of us to understand how an alienating parent could implant information that may be directly at variance with what the child had previously believed and experienced with the now targeted parent.
Parental alienation syndrome is a theory that was invented by a man named Richard Gardner. He said there is a syndrome called parental alienation whereby the custodial parent, who is usually the mother, is trying to alienate the children from the father. And she's doing it by raising these false abuse
You have a
allegations.
child who is reluctant or refuses to visit a parent, or who makes complaints that the other parent is abusing them and refuses to go to visitation. The cause of that is the mother doing things to sabotage the relationship with the
Parents
father.
have a right to protect their children from abuse by the other parent. Protective fathers have a right to protect their children.
You hear the mother basically fishing for a reason to get a restraining order, is the way I take that. Is that?
What I heard was the example of the suggestibility of children. And all of this mystery is going on around them, and it doesn't feel good because it isn't good. What is a restraining order? Well, why would you get a restraining order against my dad? And the explanation that is given for it is confusing, and there's no sense to be made of it in this child's experience. So mom has the opportunity to prevail in this.
And she's looking for a reason, like, oh, he left you alone in the car, or oh my God, how
Right.
could you do that? No, whether or not you should, but I mean, she was looking for a reason there. But this was based on a friend of yours, someone you know, is kind of where you got the idea?
Yeah, I had watched a girlfriend of mine go through a divorce, and she had a little boy about Jake's age, and I kind of watched her incrementally. As time went by, things got a little bit more hostile, and soon enough he was refusing to go on visits. The obsession that she had, it starts off mild enough, but then it starts to take a life of its own. And that's what's so disturbing, because there's just no end to the allegations. They create a reality.
The parental alienation syndrome has been described as the Stockholm syndrome taking place on the home front.